Hello, welcome to another video. The topic of the video is obviously research as a freshman at UC Berkeley. You know, what I think. So, I want to start by detailing my background a little bit. Laying out the facts I think is important. So, in high school I took AP classes. I aimed to take the most difficult STEM classes. Like, they offered AP Calc BC, I took it. They offered multivariable calculus, I took it. Offered physics E&M, I took it. There was a CADing class that I took. I took a community college class that was CADing, or that was like an introduction to engineering stuff, which in the most important skill out of that was CADing. During summer of 2023, I cold emailed a handful of professors. A handful is in like 30, maybe 40, getting close to 40. One of the ones who got back to me offered a high school research assistant position at his biomedical devices lab, and this is like my biggest, potentially my biggest asset on my resume when going out and like cold emailing again to Berkeley professors. So how I found the opportunity at Berkeley is more or less the same, where I had this list of professors and I just sent a ton of cold emails. And these cold emails are the method behind them. I'll just detail that real quick. You don't know the professor, you just know of them, and you send the email. They don't know you. You got to be respectful. You got to be concise, because they're very busy people. You know, you want to get to your point. You don't want to dance around it. I imagine flattery can go a long way, but at the same time, don't be like cheesy about it. Keep it concise. Be curious. Be enthusiastic. Detail your credentials a little bit, or enough where they get the idea of your experience. Like, attach your resume, attach your CV, add a PS or something, but something that they can look into if they're curious more of your previous experience, but still have enough on that main email section to break down your what you could contribute to their lab. So I had a template for this, because what I could contribute is more or less the same for all the labs that I applied to. And of course, what I have previously, like classes I've taken, can be copy pasted everywhere. The first paragraph is where I had a little bit of variation. So this is where I went onto their websites, read enough of what their research is about, where I could kind of comment like, oh, this is interesting. This is what I would be interested in doing. That's cool. Is there an opportunity to work on this, etc., etc. So it kind of shows that you did your research. That is potentially the biggest time consuming part. Their emails will all be on a website somewhere in the department. Yeah, so you basically have this template, and you change up a little bit to kind of tailor to the professor, and then you have the rest of your credentials on the bottom, and you want to keep this short, like I said, respectful, and you want to show enthusiasm without being cheesy. Okay, so my personal experience is I don't know if I said this already, but out of like 30-ish emails I sent, I got responses from like 7, 8 of them. Handful of automated responses, a lot of no's, or a lot of you should take this class or wait till this and then ask me again. And 2 of them I got back, and they were like, yeah, pull up to this meeting or come meet with us on this date and we'll talk about it. Yeah, so my experience is that at that point, if you get invited to some sort of meeting like that or an interview, you're kind of already in. You just have to like seal the deal a little bit, or like that. The hardest step is probably getting a response, I want to say. With my experience, it was like I met with the people for my current lab and a different lab that I almost did work for, and it was when I was there, they just told me about the stuff I would be doing and then asked if I would be open to it. So likely, if they respond, they want you to an extent. So during these actual interviews, it felt like my CADing experience and my coding experience were the biggest selling points. My actual lab experience didn't seem a whole lot of importance. It just kind of spoke to the type of work ethic I have, because that, honestly, as a high schooler, the biggest skill I had, like, I could code and I could CAD, but that was kind of it. I hadn't taken E&M at that point, so there wasn't a lot I could do. They couldn't teach me circuits and stuff at this specific lab. Or they could have taught me, it would have taken a while. I wasn't going to be there for a while. But okay, my point is, these hard skills at this level seem to be the most important while you're at the door, as in That's the first thing that they'll kind of want. My experience over the course of working for this lab, being able to absorb like information and apply it and learn skills is also very important. So that's something you want to emphasize when you go and interview and on your resume. Okay, more in the interviewing process. I met with this PhD student and this fourth year undergrad who's basically a PhD student. He's like super far ahead. They just went over the project. They explained what I would be doing or if I'm familiar a little bit, showed me the lab a little bit, said they need to finalize with the professor, and then I went and met the professor. But at that point, I also had kind of foot in the door. When I walked in the interview, during the interview, the way we were talking about it, I basically had the role already. If I said something crazy, it probably wouldn't have had it, obviously, but at that point, I kind of had it. I just had to assure him I could commit to the hours. Anyways, my experience, and why, I guess I should say, why I went for research. The idea is you want to get your foot in the door, is how I've thought about it. As a first year, it is somewhat uncommon to have research. There are a couple labs that cater a little bit more for first years where they're understanding that a certain amount of courses hasn't been, or like a certain know-how isn't there. Or that's every lab, of course. If you have a first year, they won't know a whole lot of things because that's why you go to university, so you can learn how to do those things. But the lab I'm specifically working at is a small one, so there's a lot of self-learning, and self-sufficiency is very important, and being able to use the resources on, like, we have a big Notion page where everything is detailed. I like self-studied a circuits class over the winter break so that I could take on new projects this semester. Stuff like that, where they'll kind of teach you, like they taught me how to solder, which is cool. There's a couple of things like that they'll teach me, but otherwise it's kind of, you should figure it out on your own a little bit because we don't really have the manpower to provide you this sort of education. So I guess the reason I went to do lab was, even though like maybe for first years it's not very common, was to get my foot in the door so that there could be more opportunities down the line, such as learning how to solder and learning circuits and stuff, so I could work on that specific project. Because I'm in the lab, it's easy to just switch projects versus learning the skills and then now having to find a place where they need it. Yeah, so foot in the door, so getting more lab experience later down the line is easier. Acquiring new skills like soldering was one of the big ones that I was thinking about when I was like, oh, things like solder, blah, 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 that type of stuff. Of course, exposure to the pathway people take. I'm like acquaintance to friends with these fourth years and PhD students, and it's kind of, you get to hear about how they did things, about new stuff that's in the field. You're shown cool stuff other people are doing because there are many groups within the lab. You're shown the inner workings of research and academia. That's the word. You're exposed to academia a little bit, how that works. That's why I do research. I was debating whether or not I should have waited till I had more classes under my belt, more skills, but I think the foot in the door argument is the biggest reason. Okay, I guess I'll talk about the experience itself now. So, like I've said, there's a couple things that I've been taught by them and a couple of things I had to figure out on my own. This lab specifically is smaller, and it's also newer at the university. There's less of a pipeline developed for first years, whereas other labs might have a larger system where they'll allocate mentors for you. I kind of have mentors, but it's not like official, and they kind of just like it's not very strict on how much they want to teach or have me contribute to. One of the projects I'm on, I'm actually like, I wouldn't say I'm an equal, but it's like 40-60 me to the other guy in terms of this new project within the professor's lab. Like, I did literature reviews, where I basically just read a bunch of papers on the new technology so that we could design our own device. That's how like high up I am on the project, if that makes sense. I feel like this wouldn't happen as commonly if it were a larger lab with a more established system for our undergrad. In terms of workload, they told me the time commitment was 8 to 10 hours a week, so not even a part-time job technically. However, I don't clock in. It's mostly up to me how long I'm there because it's more project based. you either get it done or you don't. So there are certain, I guess, checkpoints, like a device we want to test. Let's say I need to have these molds catted by this certain date so that we can send them out because they get back this week, or we have to wait another weekend or something. So for time's sake, I'll spend like an extra 5 hours working on it. Or the molds are being delivered, so I have to wait. So I'll just do schoolwork. If I have midterms, I can tell them like, oh, I need to take this week off because I have a midterm Tuesday and Friday. They're just cool with it. However, I'm not getting paid, and I've chosen not to get units for it because I don't really need the units, and that's potentially problematic, honestly. Like, I'll look into that later, but that's not the point. The point is both flexible and not in terms of, because if you don't show up, you don't get stuff done, and if you have to leave, then it's fine. Yeah, that's the workload. In terms of what there is to do, there's with most groups that I've done research with, the one I did in high school, they did the same thing where you have this presentation day. It's kind of like not really presentation day, but more like update day, where at my high school thing, the professor wasn't around, so it was this postdoc that I would make slides for to update them on like what I've done in the week. For a professor at Berkeley, every Wednesday we meet at Corey Hall, we share slides. Those slides have to be pretty nice. Like, not in terms of aesthetic, doesn't really matter. In terms of detail, you need everything on there. Like, I don't know if people have the same experience with English classes where it would be annoying when you have that person with the slides where they're just reading a block of text. So I was kind of conditioned to avoid doing that. And that kind of bit me in the ass when I'm doing these presentations where I'm supposed to be talking through most of the details because I have it all in my head and it's not on the slides. It's just graphics or something. You need to put everything on the slides. And that's true. I'm lying. I've been to like 3 different types of research meetings, but everyone does this. Every single graphic has captions and there are paragraphs of text. There's blocks of text everywhere, and of course images. Must have. In addition to these presentation slides, I'd say it would depend on how much you can do, because obviously someone like me, if you can code and PCB design and solder or whatever, there's like certain levels to these tasks. Like, so I was soldering stuff, I was coding stuff, but there's also a lot of time I spend doing like more manual labor, like making this silicone stuff where I'm just basically just measuring and pouring these 2 substances together and mixing them and then putting them in the vacuum chamber and then taking it out and then looking at it and putting it back in because the bubbles aren't out, and then curing the little silicone parts. So someone has to do that. That might take up a lot of your hours. Of course, it's different lab to lab, and that's just the nature of having undergrads in the lab where you have postdocs, where undergrads could be doing something the postdoc doesn't have to, right? Okay, learning on your own. I mentioned before I spent a lot of time having to like learn. I spent the winter studying circuits from this lecture series that my, mentor gave me. Things like ImageJ, which is a software. I learned how to use it for lab. Soldering was taught to me, but to an extent, like you would have to practice on your own a little bit. PCB design, I'm kind of working on that now, but that's something that I would have to learn through the Notion pages and through online courses before I can start doing it for the lab. And I think probably even with labs with better undergrad pipeline, you would have to do a lot of learning on your own, just because it's not really a class. It's more like you learn stuff so you can do more stuff. So that's my experience with it. Overall, I would recommend, if you have an opportunity, you should take it. There's that whole idea of you need an adjustment period if you're a first year, but it's different for everyone. And if you think you can handle it, if you think you can balance studies with lab, which I feel like I've been doing an okay job with, sometimes it feels like I can't say no to the lab, and it's a frustrating because it might burn you out. But in general, I've been able to I will go work out 5 days a week. My test scores are pretty decent still. Albeit I'll have a bunch of lower div undergrad classes right now. But yeah, I've been able to do decent amount of work. I've been able to learn decent amount of stuff, meet new people, learn new skills, and of course my foot's in the door. So I think that's the biggest thing. Thank you so much for watching. Highly recommend watching my other videos just because they're not as much talking. It's more just fun and UC Berkeley life. But yeah, thank you for watching. This was my first year undergrad research experience.